ancient China, 700 before the Common Era, to about 200 before the Common Era. Compared to the Mediterranean world, China in Far East Asia was another world. It developed in relative isolation compared to the Mediterranean societies that developed at the same time. China's relative isolation was a function of geography. To the west, mountains and desert blocked access to China, or at least limited. To the north was a steppe. Few people lived there compared to the river valleys. And to the east was the Pacific Ocean, the largest ocean in the world. Those physical realities limited the amount of cultural interaction with the rest of the world. Chinese populations in the earliest ages concentrated in the upper Yellow River Valley. On the map, you can see that as the red circle. Not until Chinese civilization developed and the Chinese learned to control the rivers and stop the devastating flooding did Chinese populations finally move down into the coastal regions that they're known for today. China, too, experienced a Neolithic revolution. In China, they domesticated dogs, they domesticated pigs, they domesticated a grain called millet, they domesticated rice, they domesticated silk. So just like their Mediterranean and Near Eastern counterparts, they learned to adapt to the environment they had. Chinese also developed pottery and metallurgy. It's not known today whether that pottery and metallurgy, those technologies were independent of the ancient Near East, but certainly at the same time they had them too. China also built walled cities. They had their own writing system. So all of the characteristics that we've already discussed in the ancient Near East apply to Chinese settlement and the development of their civilization. What was key to their differences is they had very few competitors. The Chinese population was isolated from the larger populations in the other parts of the world. This allowed Chinese society to develop relatively unchanged. What this meant is that Chinese society developed a very conservative outlook. Chinese political, intellectual, and religious leaders all sought to preserve existing social institutions with little or no change. That obviously wasn't possible, but that was their goal, and every time there was a change, they couched it in terms of restoration. Obviously, if you take time to study Chinese society and Chinese history, you can see multiple changes over time. You can look at the details and minor things that moved from year to year and dynasty to dynasty. But in a survey class, we're simply going to look at the broad patterns established in the Neolithic age and how those broad patterns carried through to the development of a Chinese empire around the year 200 before the Common Era. The lecture starts then in feudal China. We move then to the Qin dynasty, the first empire in China, and see how the Han dynasty, one of the most successful dynasties in early Chinese history, built upon their earlier traditions and restored Chinese greatness.